how great is this from a league standpoint to have these big market teams all in the playoffs at once? I can't remember having this type of situation since I've been watching the NBA.
It's great to have so many competitive teams. I'll only say on behalf of some of the smaller markets, and look at the Milwaukee Bucks, for example, with Giannis. He obviously decided to re-up his contract and stay there. There's truly not just a national market for NBA basketball these days, but a global market. And while it's great to have a collective bargaining system, where every team is in a position to compete, and sure, it's great to see all this interest around these big market teams. Where I cringe a bit is when I hear people say somehow the league needs it to be successful. I mean, certainly the NFL doesn't need their big markets to be good, to be successful. I think we're not the NFL, but on the other hand, I think increasingly we have more and more national teams. I mean, these players, regardless of where they get drafted, because the interest from all the various ESPN shows and websites, and the game telecasts themselves, because of enormous interest in social media and digital media. The fact you can get these games on your phone now, means that guys can draw tremendous national and global interest regardless of where they play. And so our goal, of course, is always to have a competitive 30-team league. So it's more, to me, happenstance that you see all these big markets competing this year. Obviously, as a New Yorker, it's fun for me to see the Knicks and Nets competing here in town. Obviously, it's what people like to talk about, that they're hometown teams. But again, I'm most focused on having a competitive league, and we're seeing really positive signs that there are opportunities regardless of where those teams are located.
Most important thing, right, is the health of all the franchises, no matter what the markets are. There's no doubt about it. And also, obviously, the health of the league and what you guys, Adam, and all other sports leagues as well, and all businesses and society, getting through a pandemic, finishing a season, you not having to stop much at all throughout this season, despite some of the positives that you had with some of these teams. And now we're starting to see, I mean, in Phoenix, even before the season ended, you had some big crowds in Phoenix for the Suns. The Garden is going to have on Sunday 15,000 people for the Knicks-Hawks Game 1. So as we start to see crowds and people coming back into the buildings, by the time we get to an NBA Finals, do you think we could be at full capacity?
Alan, potentially, yes. I mean, what's been so interesting is how quickly things have changed, and whether from 14 months ago, roughly, when we shut down, to a CDC change in a mask rule last week, followed here in New York by Governor Cuomo, then changing the rules around arena attendance, that we went from roughly 10 to 20% capacity at Madison Square Garden only a week ago, to your point, to 15,000 people projected to be in attendance on Sunday. And so if we're seeing that in New York, and New York's been a fairly restrictive state when you compare states to states, across the country. I think it's very possible that come July, when our finals will be, that we could see essentially full buildings. I mean, my sense is, through the remainder of the season, to me, that of course, there's the health and safety of the players, the health and safety of the fans. We don't have mandatory vaccinations among our players. That only could happen if it was something the Players Association agreed to. But even though it's not mandatory, we've had great success. I mean, for example, the general public, I think, is up to roughly 60% of people have had at least one shot. We're close to 80% with our players. And part of that has been clearly incentives to get vaccinated. And those incentives are obviously your ability to stay on the court and be healthy, but also additional protocols that allow, beginning 2 months or so ago, when players began to get vaccinated, ability to go out on the road and go to restaurants, et cetera, and things like that. So I don't think we're going to be complete capacity by July, because I think, given that we're still going to have players who are unvaccinated, I think we need to do everything we can to protect them for the remainder of this season, not just, of course, for their health, but also that would have a huge impact on the competition for some of those players who are unvaccinated if they were to test positive. But so, with the exception of the area directly around the court, where we're still going to be fairly conservative to the end of the season, just as we're seeing in New York now, 15,000 people from where we were, is quite amazing. Again, especially that if we were doing this show only a week ago, I wouldn't have been as optimistic. But we're following the CDC guidelines, we're following state by state guidelines, and I think the great news now, sort of the broader statement, is that what the federal government is saying and our public health officials are saying is that these vaccines are highly effective, and it means that fans. And that's really essentially what's happening in New York. The reason the Knicks can have so many fans is that most of the arena will be filled in sections that are reserved for people who've been vaccinated. And what we're hearing from these health officials is that if you're vaccinated, again, it's not perfect. There's always a little bit of risk that we're going to continue to live with, but that you can go in, and enjoy yourself at a game. And that's what's enabling us quickly to start filling our buildings again.